The palace of Averon Prime stretched across the sky like a crystal mountain. Inside its walls, Queen Velissa ruled over 300 star systems. Her guards were the best warriors in the galaxy. They called themselves the Sentinels. Each one was born and raised to fight. Their bodies changed with special science to make them stronger and faster than normal people. Park Doyen was not one of them. He was human, and humans were new to space. Only 200 years ago, his people still lived on one small planet called Earth. Now they traveled between stars, but other species still looked down on them. They thought humans were weak and primitive. Doyen used to work for Earth's military. He was a combat engineer, someone who built defenses and planned security. After he left the military, he took jobs on different worlds. 6 months ago, the Telvari Empire hired him to check their palace security. They wanted to know if their defenses had any weak spots. He found plenty of problems. The Sentinels didn't like hearing about their mistakes from a human. But Doyen did his job well, so they offered him a position as a junior security officer. The pay was good, and he had nowhere else to be. He accepted. The Sentinels made fun of him. They called him soft-skin, because humans didn't have thick armor like the Telvari. They gave him the worst jobs, the boring posts where nothing ever happened. Doyen didn't complain. He showed up, did his work, and went home. That was enough for him. Tonight was the autumn convergence, a special night when both of Averon Prime's moons lined up in the sky. Queen Velissa spent this night in her meditation chamber, a private room where she connected with the spirits of her ancestors. Nobody was allowed to disturb her. The room blocked all signals and sounds. She sat inside, completely alone and peaceful. Doyen drew the midnight watch outside her chamber. It was a ceremonial post, basically guard duty over an empty hallway. The real security teams protected the outer walls and gates. He stood there with his rifle, watching a corridor where nothing would happen. It was boring, but he had done boring before. At 2:47 in the morning, everything changed. Doyen's tactical display lit up with red warnings. Alarms screamed through his earpiece. The palace shields had failed. Something had disabled their main defenses. Then the explosion started. The eastern wing of the palace erupted in fire. Doyen's comm unit filled with panicked voices. Attack ships were dropping from the sky. Enemy soldiers were teleporting directly into the palace complex. The Krell Dominion had come for the Queen. The Krell were old enemies of the Telvari Empire. They had fought wars for thousands of years. Recently there had been peace, but it was an uneasy peace. Now that peace was shattered, Krell assassins were inside the palace hunting the Queen. Through his comm, Doyen heard the Sentinels responding. Captain Thelrix, their commander, barked orders. His voice was calm and professional. He made a quick decision. The Queen had 3 children living on other worlds. Her bloodline would survive. The military commanders needed to evacuate and regroup. They would save what they could and counterattack later. All units fall back to evacuation points, Thelrix ordered. This is a strategic withdrawal. Move now. The Sentinels obeyed. They were trained to follow orders without question. Doyen listened as they reported their positions, moving toward the shuttles, protecting the military leaders. They were doing the smart thing, the tactical thing. Save the command structure. Live to fight another day. Doyen stood in the empty hallway looking at the sealed door of the meditation chamber. The Queen was inside, completely unaware. The chamber blocked all signals. She couldn't hear the explosions or the alarms. She didn't know her guards were leaving. She didn't know assassins were coming for her. He thought about the evacuation order. It hadn't specifically included him. He was just a junior officer, a human contractor. Nobody would blame him for leaving. Nobody expected a human to stay and fight Krell assassins alone. It would be suicide. He looked at the door again. Queen Velissa was in there, defenseless. She had hired him to protect her. She trusted her security. She trusted him. Doyen made his choice. He pressed the emergency lockdown button, and heavy blast doors slammed shut at both ends of the corridor. The hallway became a sealed tunnel 30 meters long, with the meditation chamber at one end and him at the other. He checked his rifle. Full charge. He had 2 pistols on his belt, 4 fragmentation charges in his pack, and whatever equipment he could grab from nearby storage lockers. Not much to fight with, but enough to make the Krell work for it. His comm unit buzzed. It was an automated message, confirming all personnel had reached evacuation points. All personnel except him. He turned off the comm. He didn't need the distraction. Doyen began moving through the hallway, setting up defenses. He pulled maintenance equipment from storage panels, creating barriers and traps. He loosened ceiling panels so they would fall with a touch. He rigged power couplings to overload. He positioned himself behind an overturned cargo drone, giving himself cover and a clear line of fire down the corridor. It wasn't much. Any serious assault would break through in minutes. But Doyen had learned a long time ago that you fight with what you have, not what you wish you had. He settled into position and waited. The first assassins arrived 12 minutes later. His motion sensors pinged. 3 contacts moving fast and quiet. Krell shadow stalkers. Elite killers with advanced stealth technology. They were nearly invisible, just shimmers in the air. They didn't expect resistance. Why would they? All the guards had evacuated. This corridor should be empty. They moved confidently, not carefully. That was their first mistake. The lead stalker triggered Doyen's first trap. A ceiling panel crashed down, 200 kilograms of metal and crystal. The Krell dodged, but it broke his stealth field for half a second. That was enough. Doyen fired 3 shots. The first 2 missed. The third caught the Krell in the throat, right where his armor had a weak point. The alien went down hard. The other 2 scattered, going full stealth. Doyen couldn't see them anymore, but he knew they were there. He waited, breathing slowly, watching for the shimmer. Krell's stealth tech was good, but not perfect. There, a slight distortion near the left wall, he fired. The second Krell stumbled, his shield damaged. Doyen fired again and again. The assassin fell, 1 left. The third Krell was smart. He didn't rush in. He waited, looking for an opening. Doyen gave him one. He pretended to reload, leaving himself exposed. The Krell took the bait and charged forward. Doyen triggered the fragmentation charge he had hidden near his position. The explosion was deafening in the enclosed space. Shrapnel tore through the air. The third assassin collapsed, his armor shredded. Silence fell over the hallway. Doyen's ears were ringing. Smoke filled the corridor. 3 bodies lay between him and the sealed blast door. He checked each one, making sure they were dead. They were. Behind him, the meditation chamber door opened. Queen Velissa stepped out, her face confused and alarmed. She was tall and elegant, with blue-gray skin and large dark eyes. She wore ceremonial robes, not armor. She looked at the dead assassins, then at Doyen, then at the sealed corridor. "What happened?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the tension in it. Doyen gave her the facts quickly. The palace was under attack. The Krell were here. Her guards had evacuated. He had stayed. More assassins would be coming soon. The queen stared at him. She was used to giving orders, to people obeying her instantly, but this situation was beyond her experience. She was a ruler, not a warrior. "Why did you stay?" she asked. The others left. "You could have escaped." Doyen checked his rifle, replacing the power cell. He didn't look at her when he answered. "You hired me to protect you, Your Majesty. I don't leave jobs half finished." More warnings flashed on his display. More contacts approaching. The Krell were sending another team. Doyen moved back into position behind his makeshift barricade. "You should go back inside, Your Majesty," he said. "This might get loud." Queen Velissa looked at the human guard, this small figure who had chosen to stand alone against impossible odds. She went back into the meditation chamber, but she didn't seal the door. She wanted to see. She needed to understand what kind of person would make this choice. The second wave of assassins hit the corridor like a storm. The second wave came with 6 Krell warriors. These were not stealth assassins. These were heavy assault troops wearing thick armor and carrying plasma weapons. They blew through the blast door with shaped charges, and the explosion shook the entire corridor. Doyen had expected this. He had moved his position, taking cover behind a support pillar farther back. The Krell poured through the smoking doorway, spreading out in professional formation. They were good, but they made one mistake. They bunched up at the entrance. Doyen triggered his second fragmentation charge. The explosion caught 3 of them in the kill zone. Their armor protected them from the worst of it, but it knocked them down and scattered their formation. He opened fire immediately, targeting the ones who were still standing. The corridor became a nightmare of plasma bolts and bullets. The Krell returned fire, their weapons tearing chunks out of the walls. Doyen used the narrow space to his advantage. They couldn't surround him. They had to come straight at him, and that meant running through his field of fire. One Krell charged forward with a plasma blade. Doyen shot him twice in the chest, but the armor held. The alien kept coming. Doyen rolled to the side. grabbed a broken piece of metal from the floor and jammed it into the gap between the Krell's helmet and chest plate. The warrior went down choking on his own blood. Another Krell tried to flank using a side maintenance tunnel. Doyen had blocked it earlier with a collapsed support beam, but the warrior was trying to squeeze through. Doyen pulled his pistol and fired 3 shots into the narrow gap. The Krell stopped moving. The fight lasted 4 minutes. When it ended, 6 more bodies lay in the corridor. Doyen was bleeding from a plasma graze on his left arm. The burn went deep and the pain was intense. He gritted his teeth and kept moving, checking each body, taking their weapons and ammunition. Queen Vilissa came out of the meditation chamber. She had watched the entire fight. Her hands were shaking, but her face was calm. She looked at Doyen's injury. "You're hurt," she said. "I'm functional," Doyen replied. He was already setting up new defensive positions, dragging Krell bodies to create additional cover. "We need to prepare for the next wave. They'll send more. How many can you fight?" the Queen asked. She wasn't questioning him. She genuinely wanted to know what their chances were. Doyen thought about it honestly. "Depends on how smart they are. If they keep sending small teams, I can hold for a while. If they send everyone at once, we're done." "Then we need to make them send small teams," Vilissa said. She walked to a wall panel and pressed her hand against it. Royal access codes lit up. "I can lock down sections of the palace. I can force them to take specific routes. I can make them come at us the way you want." Doyen looked at her with new respect. She was thinking tactically.
"Can you also trigger false alarms in other sections?"
"Make them think you're somewhere else?" "Yes," she said. "I can make them search the entire palace." "Do it," Doyen said. "Buy us time." The Queen worked the palace systems while Doyen reinforced their position. He was running on adrenaline now, pushing through the pain in his arm. He knew the crash would come later. Right now, he needed to keep moving. Hours passed. The Krell sent 3 more teams, each one smaller than the last. They were being cautious now, testing his defenses. Doyen picked them off, using captured Krell weapons when his own ran dry. The corridor became a graveyard. The air smelled like burned metal and death. By dawn, 14 Krell bodies littered the hallway. Doyen had lost count of how many times he had been shot at. His armor had taken hits. He had burns on his arm and leg, cuts from shrapnel and bruises covering half his body. He was exhausted, running on nothing but willpower. The Queen had medical supplies in her meditation chamber. She came out and insisted on treating his wounds. Doyen didn't have the energy to argue. He sat down heavily while she worked on his arm with antiseptic and synthetic skin. Her hands were surprisingly gentle. She had 4 fingers instead of 5, but they moved with precision. She had clearly studied medicine as part of her royal education. She cleaned the plasma burn and sealed it with medical foam. "My sentinels left me," she said quietly while she worked. "They were bred to protect me, enhanced from birth, trained their entire lives, and they left. They followed orders," Doyen said. He was too tired to be diplomatic. Their commander made a tactical decision. Save the military structure, keep the Empire alive. It made sense from a strategic view. "But you stayed," Vilissa said. "You're not even Tilvari. You're human. My people barely consider you civilized, yet you stayed when they ran." Doyen didn't know what to say to that. He had made a choice in a moment, and he couldn't fully explain it even to himself. It had just felt wrong to leave her. "Sometimes the right thing doesn't make strategic sense," he finally said. "Sometimes you just do what you're supposed to do." The Queen finished with his arm and moved to check his other injuries. She worked in silence for a while. Then she asked, "What is Earth like? Your homeworld?" It was a strange question to ask in the middle of a siege, but Doyen understood. She was trying to understand him, to figure out what kind of species would produce someone like him. "Crowded," Doyen said. "We have about 12 billion people now. It's a tough world. Lots of water, lots of storms. We fight a lot among ourselves mostly. We're not very good at peace, but you're good at war," Vilissa observed. "We've had practice," Doyen admitted. "We fought each other for thousands of years before we reached the stars. We know how to survive. Is that what you're doing now? Surviving?" Doyen shook his head. "No, Your Majesty. I'm doing my job. There's a difference." A new alarm sounded on his tactical display. More contacts approaching, but these were moving differently. Slower, more careful. Doyen stood up, testing his weight on his injured leg. It hurt, but it held. They're changing tactics, he said. They're going to try something different this time. What should we do? The Queen asked. We adapt, Doyen said simply. He picked up his rifle and moved to a new position. That's what humans do best. We adapt. The Krell sent a negotiator this time. The warrior stood at the entrance of the corridor out of direct line of sight. He spoke through a translator device, his voice smooth and reasonable. Queen Velissa, the Krell said. I am Velcor, diplomat of the Krell Dominion. This siege is pointless. Your palace has fallen. Your military has fled. Surrender now and you will be treated with honor. You will face a fair trial. Your people will be spared. Doyen looked at the Queen. It was her decision. He was just a guard. Velissa stepped forward into view of the Krell. She stood straight and tall, every inch a queen despite her torn and bloody robes. The Telvari Empire does not surrender to assassins and cowards, she said. Her voice was cold and hard. You will not take me alive. The Krell diplomat tried to argue, but Doyen had heard enough. He aimed carefully and fired. The shot took off Velcor's communication antenna. The Krell stumbled back and his guards pulled him away. Negotiations closed, Your Majesty, Doyen said. For the first time since the siege began, Queen Velissa smiled. It was a fierce smile, not friendly. You are an interesting human, Park Doyen. I've been called worse, Doyen replied. They both knew the real assault was coming now. The Krell had tried stealth, tried force, tried diplomacy. None of it had worked. Now they would send everything they had. Doyen and the Queen prepared as best they could. Night fell again. They had survived one full day. Doyen ate her rations from the Queen's emergency supplies. He cleaned his weapons. He checked every defensive position twice. The Queen helped him, learning how to reload magazines and arm grenades. She was a fast learner. If they break through, Doyen said, you run. There's a ventilation shaft in the meditation chamber. It's small, but you can fit. It leads to the lower levels. And leave you? Velissa asked. I'll hold them as long as I can. Give you time to escape. The Queen looked at him for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised him. No, if you stand, I stand. We face this together. Doyen wanted to argue, but he saw the determination in her eyes. She had made up her mind. She was done running, done hiding. She was a queen, and she would act like one. Then you need to learn how to shoot properly, Doyen said. He picked up a Krell plasma rifle. Let me show you. The fourth assault came at midnight. 8 Krell heavy troopers in full combat armor, the kind designed to break through bunker walls. They carried heavy weapons and explosive charges. This was the killing blow. The Krell were done playing games. Doyen looked at the Queen. She held her rifle steady, her face calm. She gave him a small nod. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The Krell blew through the last defensive barrier and charged into the corridor. The final battle had begun. The 8 Krell heavy troopers moved like a machine. Their armor was thick and black, covered with battle scars. These were not regular soldiers. These were veterans, warriors who had survived 100 battles. They came through the breach in tight formation, covering each other perfectly. Doyen knew he couldn't fight them head-on. The corridor offered some advantage, but not enough. These troopers would tear through his defenses in seconds. He needed to change the battlefield. Your Majesty, he said quickly, into the meditation chamber. Now. For once, Velissa didn't argue. She moved fast and Doyen followed her, laying down covering fire. Plasma bolts chased them through the doorway. The meditation chamber was large and circular, with a high ceiling. Crystalline pillars rose from the floor, each one containing the preserved remains of a Telvari ancestor. The Telvari believed these spirits watched over their queens. Today, Doyen would make those spirits useful in a different way. He grabbed one of his last explosive charges and planted it at the base of a support column near the entrance. The chamber's architecture was ancient and ceremonial, not designed for combat. That meant it had weak points. The Krell came through the door 3 at a time. Doyen waited until they were in the kill zone, then triggered the explosive. The support column cracked and tilted. The ceiling above it groaned and began to collapse. 2 tons of crystalline stone came crashing down. 2 Krell went down immediately, crushed under the debris. A third was caught at the edge, his leg trapped. The other 5 scattered, looking for cover among the crystal pillars. The entrance was now blocked by rubble, creating a narrow choke point. The Krell would have to climb over their dead comrades to reach them. Doyen grabbed the queen and pulled her behind the largest crystal pillar. "Stay down and shoot anything that moves," he told her. "Aim for the neck joints. That's where their armor is weakest." The battle became chaos. The Krell spread out, using the pillars for cover just like Doyen had planned. But this was his ground now. He knew every angle, every line of sight. He moved through the chamber like a ghost, appearing long enough to take a shot, then disappearing before return fire could find him. A Krell trooper rounded a pillar and came face to face with Doyen. The alien was faster, bringing his plasma rifle up first. But Doyen had dropped his rifle and pulled his combat knife. He ducked under the gun barrel and drove the blade up into the trooper's neck joint. The Krell made a gurgling sound and collapsed. Another trooper charged from the side. Doyen grabbed the dead Krell's rifle and fired from the hip. The shots went wide, but they bought him a second to dive behind cover. The charging trooper's plasma bolts tore chunks out of the crystal pillar Doyen was hiding behind. Then Queen Vilissa shot the trooper from behind. Her first shot missed. Her second shot hit his shoulder armor and bounced off. Her third shot found the neck joint just like Doyen had taught her. The Krell dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Vilissa stared at the body, her hands shaking. She had killed before during the earlier fights, but this was different. This was close. This was personal. She could see the Krell's face through his helmet visor. "Keep shooting," Doyen shouted. "Don't think, just shoot." 3 Krell left, plus the one trapped under the rubble. The trapped one was screaming something in the Krell language. Doyen didn't speak Krell, but he recognized the tone. The trooper was calling for help. One of the remaining Krell tried to reach his trapped comrade. It was a mistake. Loyalty was admirable, but in combat it could be fatal. Doyen shot him twice while he was exposed. The trooper's shields flickered and died. The third shot punched through his chest armor. The last 2 Krell realized they were losing. They fell back toward the entrance, trying to retreat through the rubble. Doyen didn't give them the chance. He rushed forward, using the crystal pillars for cover, closing the distance. The Queen provided covering fire, keeping the Krell pinned down. The final fight was brutal and short. Doyen took a plasma bolt to his side, and the pain was blinding. His armor absorbed most of it, but the heat still burned through. He stumbled, and a Krell trooper raised his weapon for the killing shot. Queen Vilissa shot first. Her bolt hit the Krell's helmet, cracking the visor. The trooper staggered, and Doyen finished him with a burst to the chest. The last Krell tried to run. Doyen shot him in the back. The warrior fell and didn't move. Silence filled the chamber. Smoke drifted through the air. Bodies lay scattered among the crystal pillars. Doyen leaned against a pillar, breathing hard. His side hurt. Everything hurt. He was running out of ways to keep fighting. The Queen came over to him, her rifle still in her hands. She looked different now. The elegant royal was gone. In her place was someone harder, someone who had been baptized in blood and fire. "You're injured again," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook as she checked his wound. "I'm still functional," Doyen said, but even he didn't sound convincing anymore. The plasma burn on his side was bad. The medical foam could seal it, but it wouldn't heal the damage underneath. He was accumulating injuries faster than he could treat them. Vilissa worked on his wound with supplies from the meditation chamber. She was becoming good at this, her hands efficient and sure. While she worked, they heard sounds from beyond the rubble. The Krell were regrouping. More would come. "How many times can we do this?" Vilissa asked quietly. "How many more fights can you survive?" Doyen didn't answer. They both knew the truth. He was human, not a machine. He had limits, and he was approaching them fast. His body was shutting down piece by piece. Adrenaline could only carry him so far. "Tell me about your family," Vilissa said suddenly. "On Earth, do you have people waiting for you?" Doyen shook his head. "My parents died years ago. I had a brother, but we lost touch. The military was my family for a long time. After I left, I just traveled, took jobs. Moved around." "You're alone," Vilissa said. "It wasn't a question." "Most soldiers are," Doyen replied. "We don't fit in normal life anymore. Too much war in our heads. Too many things we've seen." The Queen finished with his wound and sat down beside him. They were both exhausted. Both past the point where fear meant anything. They had moved into a strange, calm place where death was just another possibility, not a terror. "I was married once," Vilissa said. "A political arrangement. He died in an accident 20 years ago. My children were raised by tutors. I've ruled for 40 cycles, and I've been alone the entire time. surrounded by thousands of people but completely alone. Is that why you spend so much time in here? Doyen asked, gesturing to the meditation chamber. The spirits of my ancestors don't judge me, Velissa said. They don't want anything from me. They just listen. It's peaceful. They sat in silence for a moment. It was strange to find companionship in the middle of a siege, but crisis had a way of cutting through normal barriers. They were just two people now, stripped of ranks and species, facing death together. I'm glad you stayed, Velissa said finally. I'm glad I wasn't alone for this. So am I, Doyen admitted. He hadn't realized it until now, but it was true. Fighting alone was harder. Having someone to fight for, someone to protect, gave it meaning. A new sound interrupted them, different from before. It was mechanical, rhythmic. Something big was moving through the palace. The Krell were bringing in heavy equipment. Doyen struggled to his feet. They're done being careful. They're going to level this entire section. Then we move, Velissa said. She pointed to a passage Doyen hadn't noticed before, hidden behind one of the larger crystal pillars. This leads to the old tunnels beneath the palace. The ancient queens used them for escape. I've never been down there, but I know they exist. Can the Krell follow us? Doyen asked. Probably, Velissa said. But down there they won't have numbers or heavy weapons. The tunnels are narrow. One person at a time, Doyen smiled despite the pain. A kill zone I can control. That might work. They gathered what supplies they could carry. Doyen took 3 rifles, all the ammunition he could find, and the remaining explosives. Velissa carried medical supplies and food. They moved quickly, aware that time was running out. The mechanical sound was getting louder. Through the smoke and dust, Doyen saw what the Krell had brought. It was a siege walker, a 4-legged war machine with heavy plasma cannons. One shot from that thing would bring down the entire chamber. Go, Doyen said, pushing the queen toward the hidden passage. I'll slow them down. Together, Velissa insisted. You said we do this together. Doyen wanted to argue, but there was no time. They slipped into the passage just as the siege walker fired its first shot. The crystal pillars exploded behind them. The meditation chamber, standing for 3,000 years, began to collapse. They ran through the darkness as the palace came down around them. The ancient tunnels were exactly as the queen had described. Narrow, dark, and twisting. Water dripped from the ceiling. The walls were carved stone, older than the palace above. They moved as fast as they could, Doyen limping, Velissa helping support his weight. Behind them, they heard the Krell entering the tunnels. The hunters had become prey, and the prey had teeth. In these narrow passages, all the Krell's advantages disappeared. It was just warrior against warrior, and Doyen had a lot of war left in him. He found a good position where the tunnel narrowed even more, barely wide enough for one person. He set up one of his last explosives as a trap. Then he and the queen moved deeper into the darkness toward whatever waited below. The Krell followed, and Doyen made them pay for every meter. The tunnels became a killing ground. This was no longer a siege. It was a hunt, and Doyen was teaching the Krell what it meant to hunt a human. The tunnels ran deep beneath the palace like veins in stone. Doyen and Queen Velissa moved through the darkness, their way lit only by the faint glow of emergency lights on their equipment. The air was cold and damp, and every sound echoed strangely through the ancient passages. Behind them, the Krell followed. But in these tight spaces, they could only come 1 or 2 at a time. Doyen used that advantage ruthlessly. He set traps at every turn, collapsed unstable sections behind them, and picked off any Krell who got too close. The hunters were learning to fear the dark. 3 days passed in the tunnels. Time became meaningless in the constant darkness. They slept in brief shifts, never more than an hour at a time. They ate the last of their rations. Doyen's injuries were getting worse, infection setting in despite the medical foam. The queen was exhausted, pushed beyond anything her royal life had prepared her for. On the morning of the 5th day, everything changed. Doyen's tactical display, which had been dead for 2 days, suddenly flickered to life. A signal was breaking through the interference. A strong signal, military-grade, broadcasting on multiple frequencies. This is the Telvari fleet to any personnel in the palace complex, a voice said through the static. The Krell have been pushed back to defensive positions. We are preparing assault operations. All survivors, broadcast your location for extraction. Doyen and Velissa looked at each other in the dim light. The fleet had returned. Help was coming, but they were deep underground, in tunnels that probably didn't appear on any modern maps. Can you send a signal from here? Velissa asked. Doyen checked his equipment. The stone and metal above them blocked most transmissions, but he had one option. An emergency beacon, military grade, designed to punch through interference. He had been saving it, afraid the Krell would track it. Now it was their only chance. He activated the beacon. It broadcast on an old Earth military frequency, one that Telvari equipment could detect but most people had forgotten about. The message was simple: Queen alive. Send extraction to Meditation Wing, Northwest Tower. Human Security Officer Park Doyen still on post. The response came within minutes. Captain Thelrix himself answered, his voice filled with disbelief. Confirm last message. Queen Velissa is alive? Repeat, confirm Queen is alive. Confirmed, Doyen replied. Queen is alive and well. We need extraction. We're in the old tunnels beneath the palace. Multiple Krell still hunting us. Hold position, Thelric said. Strike team inbound. Ita 30 minutes. They just had to survive 30 more minutes. Doyun found a defensive position where 3 tunnels met in a small chamber. He set up their last explosives as mines covered the approaches and prepared for one final stand. The Krell came faster now, sensing their prey was cornered. They had learned from their losses, adapted their tactics. They sent drones ahead to scout, used sensors to track movement. They were done underestimating the human. The fight in the junction chamber was desperate and brutal. Doyen was running on empty, his body held together by medical foam and pure stubborn will. But he had one advantage the Krell didn't understand. He was human. Humans didn't quit. They kept fighting when logic said to give up. They pushed past limits other species couldn't imagine. A Krell warrior got past his defenses and came straight at the Queen. Velissa raised her rifle and pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. Empty magazine. The Krell raised his blade. Doyen was too far away, too slow to help, but Velissa didn't freeze. She swung the empty rifle like a club, hitting the Krell's helmet. The warrior staggered and she hit him again, and again, until Doyen could reach them and put the alien down permanently. They stood back to back in the chamber, surrounded by bodies and smoke. Doyen's display showed 23 minutes until extraction. They just needed to hold, just a little longer. The Krell sent everything they had left. It was a final desperate push. 8 warriors charging through the tunnels with no regard for tactics or safety. They knew time was running out. If the Queen escaped now, their entire mission failed. Doyen triggered the mines. The explosions collapsed 2 of the 3 tunnel entrances. Now the Krell could only come from one direction. He and Velissa fired together side by side, their weapons painting the darkness with plasma fire. Krell fell, but more came behind them. Then Doyen heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Gunfire from behind them. Human gunfire, the distinctive crack of Earth-made rifles. The Telvari strike team had arrived early. They poured through the 4th tunnel, the one Doyen hadn't known existed, catching the Krell from behind. The Sentinels were magnificent. They moved like dancers, their enhanced bodies performing feats Doyen could only dream of. In 30 seconds, they cleared the chamber. The remaining Krell were dead or running. Captain Thelrix himself led the team. He was tall even for a Telvari, his armor decorated with battle honors. He stopped at the entrance to the chamber, staring at what he found. Queen Velissa stood covered in blood and dirt, holding a Krell rifle. Beside her, a human security officer swayed on his feet, barely conscious, surrounded by dozens of dead enemies. Your Majesty, Thelrix said. He sounded like he was seeing a ghost. Captain, Velissa replied. Her voice was cold enough to freeze plasma. How good of you to return. Thelrix flinched at the tone. We came as fast as we could. We regrouped the fleet and launched a counter-offensive. The Krell are in retreat. We've secured the palace grounds. You left me, Velissa said. Each word was sharp and precise. You followed your orders and abandoned your queen. This human, this officer you all mocked, he stayed. He fought for 5 days, alone, against impossible odds. He did what your enhanced warriors would not. The Sentinels looked at Doyen with new eyes. 5 days. The word spread through the strike team like wildfire. One human had held a position for 5 days against Krell special forces. It should have been impossible. Humans weren't supposed to be capable of that kind of endurance. Doyen didn't hear their whispers. He collapsed forward, his body finally admitting defeat. The Queen caught him before he hit the ground. Get him medical attention, she ordered. Now! The Sentinels rushed forward with a medical stretcher. They loaded Doyen carefully, their hands gentle. He was unconscious, his breathing shallow. The medics worked quickly, stabilizing his wounds, pumping him full of medicine. They looked worried. He should be dead, one medic said quietly. These injuries, the blood loss, the infection, any other species would have died days ago. But he's human, another medic replied, and there was respect in his voice. They don't die when they're supposed to. The extraction was a running firefight through the tunnels and back to the surface. The Krell made several attempts to stop them, but the Sentinels formed a protective wall around the Queen. They were not going to fail her twice. They reached the surface to find the palace grounds transformed into a battlefield. Telvari troops were everywhere, securing positions, treating wounded, and rounding up Krell prisoners. Dropships filled the sky, their weapons providing cover fire. A royal shuttle waited on a landing pad, its engines already running. The Sentinels loaded the Queen aboard, treating her like fragile crystal. She ignored their fussing and moved straight to where they had placed Doyen. He was strapped to a medical bed, machines connected to his body, keeping him alive. The shuttle lifted off under heavy fire. The Krell had anti-aircraft weapons and they used them all. Plasma bolts lit up the sky. The shuttle's shields flickered and failed. The pilot screamed warnings. They were taking too much damage. They might not make it. Felissa held Doyen's hand while the shuttle shook and bucked. She had faced down assassins, fought in tunnels, survived 5 days of hell. She would not lose him now. Not after everything. The shuttle broke through the atmosphere, leaving the battle behind. The flagship waited in orbit, a massive warship that dwarfed the palace below. The shuttle limped into the hangar bay, trailing smoke and sparks. Medical teams rushed forward before the engines even stopped. They pulled Doyen out on the stretcher, rushing him toward the medical wing. The Queen tried to follow, but her own people surrounded her, ministers and generals all needing her attention, all with urgent reports. The palace had fallen. The Krell were withdrawing. The Empire needed her guidance. She gave orders mechanically, her mind elsewhere. She reorganized defenses, approved military actions, and addressed her people through fleet-wide communications. She told them she was safe, that the crisis was passing, that the Telvari Empire would endure, but part of her remained in that medical wing, wondering if the human who had saved her life would survive his own heroism. The doctors said his chances were poor. Humans were tough, but there were limits even they couldn't cross. He had pushed too far, fought too long, refused to quit when his body demanded it. 3 days passed. The Queen performed her duties, managed the crisis, and coordinated the counteroffensive against the Krell. Every spare moment she visited the medical wing. Doyen remained unconscious, his body fighting its own private war against injury and infection. On the 4th day, his eyes opened. The doctors called it a miracle. The Queen called it stubbornness. She was sitting beside his bed when he woke, reading reports on a data pad. "Your Majesty," Doyen said. His voice was rough and weak. "Welcome back," Felissa said. She set down the data pad and smiled. "You've been asleep for 3 days. The doctors say you're too stubborn to die properly." "Sorry to disappoint them," Doyen said. He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Everything hurt. "What happened?" "The Krell?" "Retreating," Felissa said. "We pushed them back. The palace is secure. The Empire is safe. Because of you." Doyen shook his head slightly. "I just did my job." "You did more than that," Felissa said. "You showed the entire galaxy what humans are capable of. You stood when others fled. You fought when others would have surrendered. You saved your Queen when her own guards abandoned her." She stood up and pressed a button on the wall. The room's window shields retracted, revealing the view outside. Hundreds of ships filled the orbital space, the gathered fleet of the Telvari Empire. Every single ship had lowered their flags to half-staff. It was a military honor reserved for fallen heroes. "They're not for the dead," Felissa said. "They're for you, for the human who wouldn't quit. You've become a legend, Park Doyen. The galaxy will remember your name." Doyen looked at the ships and the honor they represented. He had just been doing his job. He hadn't wanted glory or recognition. But looking at the Queen's face, seeing the respect in her eyes, he realized he had achieved something more important. He had made a difference. He had stood for something that mattered. "I'd do it again," he said simply. "If you needed me, I'd do it all again." Queen Felissa smiled. "I know you would. That's why you're never leaving my service. You're mine now, human. Get used to it." Outside, the fleet maintained its vigil, honoring the guard who had stayed when all others fled. 6 weeks passed before Doyen could walk without help. The doctors rebuilt parts of him that the plasma fire had destroyed. They said he would carry the scars forever, that some damage couldn't be fully healed. Doyen didn't care about scars. He was alive, and that was more than he had expected during those 5 days in the dark. The story of his stand spread through the Empire like wildfire. Every news channel told the tale. Some versions were accurate. Most were exaggerated. By the time the story reached the outer colonies, Doyen had supposedly killed 300 Krell single-handedly and fought off an entire army. He found the attention embarrassing. Queen Velissa visited him every day during his recovery. Sometimes she came in her formal robes between official meetings. Other times she came late at night, tired and stressed, just wanting to talk to someone who understood. They had shared something in those tunnels, a bond that couldn't be broken by returning to normal life. The Telvari Empire struggled with what Doyen had done. The Sentinels, the proud elite guard, had been shown up by a human contractor. It was humiliating. Some demanded Doyen be honored. Others wanted him quietly sent away, his accomplishment buried to preserve their pride. Captain Thelrix fell somewhere in the middle. He visited Doyen in the medical wing, arriving without ceremony or guards. He stood at the foot of the bed, his expression troubled. "I followed my orders," Thelrix said. "I made the tactical choice. Save the military command. Protect the Empire's future. It was the right decision from a strategic perspective." "Yes," Doyen agreed. He didn't try to make the captain feel better. "It was. But I left her," Thelrix continued. "I left my queen to die. And you, a human we all mocked, you stayed. You did what I should have done." "You can't change the past," Doyen said. "You can only decide what you do next." Thelrix nodded slowly. "I have resigned my commission. The Sentinel program is being disbanded. The Queen has ordered it. We failed in our purpose." "I'm sorry," Doyen said, and he meant it. Thelrix was a good soldier who had made a hard choice. Sometimes there were no perfect answers. "Don't be," Thelrix said. "You showed us that loyalty can't be programmed or bred. It has to be chosen. We forgot that." He straightened up and gave Doyen a formal military salute. "Thank you for protecting her. Thank you for being better than us." After Thelrix left, Doyen stared at the ceiling and thought about choices. He could have run. Nobody would have blamed him. Instead, he had stayed and changed everything. One choice, one moment, and the entire galaxy shifted. 3 months after the siege, Queen Velissa called a formal assembly of the fleet. Every ship commander attended, either in person or through holographic projection. The throne room of the flagship was packed with officers, ministers, and nobles. Doyen was brought in wearing a formal uniform, specially made for the occasion. He still limped slightly, but the doctors said that would fade with time. The Queen sat on her throne wearing full royal regalia. She looked every inch the ruler of an empire, but when she saw Doyen enter, her expression softened for just a moment. "We gather today to address a matter of honor and duty," Velissa announced. Her voice carried through the chamber, amplified by the room's systems. 5 months ago, the Krell Dominion attacked my palace. They came to kill me, to destroy the royal line, to break our empire. Many guards protected the outer walls. All of them fought bravely. But when the inner palace fell, when my life was in direct danger, one officer stood alone. Park Doyen, a human security contractor, held a corridor for 5 days against impossible odds. He refused to retreat. He refused to surrender. He saved his queen when her own guards had fled. The assembled officers listened in silence. Some looked ashamed. Others looked thoughtful. All of them looked at Doyen with new respect. "The Sentinel program failed me," Velissa continued. "Not through cowardice, but through rigid thinking. They followed their orders perfectly and lost sight of their true purpose. Therefore, I am disbanding the Sentinels. They will be replaced by a new royal guard, one that values loyalty and honor over genetic enhancement." She stood up and walked down from her throne. She approached Doyen, carrying something wrapped in blue cloth. She unwrapped it, revealing a sword. Not a plasma weapon or a modern tool, but an actual blade, forged from some metal that seemed to glow with inner light. "This sword belonged to my ancestor, Queen Kalera I," Velissa said. "She founded the Telvari Empire 3,000 years ago. It has been carried by only 5 queens in all that time. Today I give it to you, Park Doyen. I name you Lord Commander of the Royal Guard. You will rebuild this force. You will teach them what real loyalty means." The assembly erupted in shocked whispers. This was unprecedented. A human given command of the Queen's personal guard? It was unthinkable. It was outrageous. It was perfect. Doyen took the sword with both hands. It was lighter than it looked, balanced perfectly. He knelt before the Queen not because anyone told him to, but because it felt right. "I accept this honor, Your Majesty," he said. "I will serve you with everything I have. I will build a guard worthy of you." "I know you will," Vilissa said. She placed her hand on his shoulder. "Rise, Lord Commander. You have work to do." The news exploded across the Empire and beyond. Earth went crazy. A human had been given one of the highest military positions in an alien empire. It proved humans belonged on the galactic stage. It proved they were more than primitive newcomers. The Earth government sent official messages of congratulations. They tried to make it political, to claim credit for Doyen's success. Doyen ignored all of it. He had work to do. Building the new royal guard took a year. Doyen recruited carefully, looking for specific qualities. He didn't care about species or genetic enhancement. He wanted people who understood duty, who could think for themselves, who would stand when others ran. He found humans, Telvari, and members of a dozen other species. He trained them hard, teaching them everything he had learned in his years of combat. The Queen watched his progress with satisfaction. The new guard was smaller than the Sentinels had been, but more effective. They knew why they were fighting. They had chosen their loyalty. Relations between the Telvari Empire and the Krell Dominion remained tense. The failed assassination had cost the Krell heavily. They paid reparations and signed new treaties. But everyone knew the peace was fragile. Another war could come at any time. Doyen prepared for it. He upgraded the palace defenses, fixed every weakness he had found during the siege. He made sure that if the Krell came again, they would find a much different target. The Queen approved every change, trusting his judgment completely. 2 years after the siege, Doyen attended a formal dinner in the royal quarters. It was a small gathering, just the Queen and a few trusted advisors. They discussed politics and strategy, but the atmosphere was relaxed. These were people who had been through fire together. They didn't need to pretend with each other. After the others left, Doyen and Vilissa stood on a balcony overlooking the rebuilt palace. The meditation wing had been restored, though Vilissa rarely used it anymore. She said she didn't need to talk to dead ancestors when she had real friends among the living. "Do you ever regret it?" Vilissa asked. "Staying that night? You could have lived a simple life. Instead, you became this." She gestured to his uniform, to the sword at his side, to everything he had become. Doyen thought about it honestly. His life was more complicated now. He had responsibilities, pressures, constant attention, but when he looked at the Queen, at the friend he had found in the darkness, he knew his answer. "No regrets," he said. "I did what felt right. Everything else just followed." "Good," Vilissa said, "because I need you here, not just as my guard, but as my friend. The Empire needs leaders who will do the right thing even when it's hard, people who will stand when others run." Below them, the city of Averin Prime sparkled with lights. Ships moved through the sky, trade and travel continuing as it always had. The Empire was stable again, strong again. The Krell threat remained, but they were ready for it. 5 years after the siege, the Galactic Council invited Earth to join as a full member. It was a huge honor, one that many species waited centuries to achieve. Humans had done it in just 200 years of space travel. When asked why, the Council representative gave a simple answer. "We have seen what humans are capable of," the representative said. "We have seen their determination, their loyalty, their refusal to quit even when defeat seems certain. Any species that can produce individuals like Park Doyen deserves a place among the stars." The ceremony was broadcast across known space. Doyen watched from the royal flagship standing beside Queen Vilissa. They didn't need to say anything. They both understood what this meant. One man, one choice, one moment of deciding to stand rather than run. It had rippled outward, changing everything. Humans were no longer ignored or dismissed. They were respected, even feared a little. Because the galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. Humans don't quit. They might be outgunned, outnumbered, and outmatched. They might be facing impossible odds with no hope of survival. But they will stand. They will fight. They will do their job even when everyone else has given up. 10 years after the siege, they built a memorial in the restored meditation wing. It preserved the corridor exactly as it had been after those 5 days. The blast doors, the bodies removed but the scars remaining, the makeshift defenses. It became a required visit for every new member of the Royal Guard. The inscription was simple, written in a dozen languages including Korean and Telvari. Here stood Park Doyen human. When the guards fled, he stayed. When the empire fell, he stood. When his queen needed him, he answered. Remember his choice. Remember his stand. Remember that true strength comes not from genetics or technology, but from the simple decision to do what is right. Students came from across the galaxy to study that corridor. Military academies analyzed the tactics. Historians debated the impact. Philosophers discussed the meaning of loyalty and duty. But for Doyun, it was never that complicated. He had been given a job. He had done it. Everything else was just people making it bigger than it was. Years later, when he was old and tired, when his body finally caught up with all the damage he had done to it, Queen Velissa visited him one last time. She was old too. Her blue-gray skin faded with age, but her eyes were still sharp, still determined. Thank you, she said simply, for everything, for staying, for standing, for being my friend. It was my honor, Your Majesty, Doyen replied. I'd do it all again. I know, Velissa said, and she smiled. That's what makes you human. The story of Park Doyen became legend. Parents told it to their children. Teachers used it in lessons about courage and duty. Soldiers invoked his name before battle. He became more than a person. He became an idea, a symbol of what it meant to stand when others fled. But at its heart, it was just a simple story. A story about a guard who did his job. A story about a human who refused to quit. A story about the moment when one man's choice changed the entire galaxy. When the guards fled, the human stayed. And in staying, he proved that humanity belonged among the stars.